Let's get started. Despite what the name says, I'm Michal Freedman. I have borrowed an account to set up this Zoom session. And I want everyone to know, as was reflected in the earlier question, the session is being recorded, and I'll find out how to access that. When I give the presentation, if you could, during the presentation, put any questions in the chat box, and I'll try to get to them during the presentation or afterwards, and then we can open it up to other questions afterwards. So as you all must know, this is part of Team North Carolina, and you are all people who indicated an interest in calling into North Carolina for state candidates as part of the Power Up strategy of 31st Street, which is to both help elect state candidates to the North Carolina legislature in the hopes of taking one or both of the houses back for Democrats, and in the process enlist more voters for Cunningham running for the US Senate and for Biden. So what I want to do is, let me try this. So I hope you're all seeing some slides. So this session will be focused on volunteering for the organization called Flip North Carolina, which is focused on electing Democrats in very crucial seats to help take back both houses, and on Alan Welland's campaign. He's a candidate for the state Senate, and he is currently not covered by Flip North Carolina, although it looks like they might include him too in their group of candidates. So I wanted to start, I was going to start with something inspirational, but instead I decided to start with reality. This is where we are. We're 35 days from the end of when you can register in North Carolina. We're only 41 days from when early voting starts, and we are 60 days from Election Day. So this is the calendar of what it means. We're this yellow splotch in September. That's today, and October 9th is the this red splotch. That's when that's when registration ends, new registration. The green lines are the period of early voting in North Carolina. And this red splotch in November is Election Day. And then there's, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a happy face after Election Day. So what I wanted to talk about today, I was going to give a sort of introduction on Team North Carolina and what it's doing, and then briefly talk about North Carolina, sort of a very brief primer on North Carolina voting rules, and then the mechanics of calling with Flip North Carolina, and then some basic tips on how one does phone canvassing. So on the introduction, what Team North Carolina has done is it's tried a lot of different activities that are offered in North Carolina to try to select the ones that seem the most effective or productive that we think would be worthwhile. And they're all run by other organizations. And we'll provide a calendar of activities that will be on the website and some other resources on the website. We will provide weekly debriefings starting Sunday, September 13th at 4 o'clock so that people can share experiences and brainstorm together. And we picked that time, 4 o'clock on Sunday, because for those people, many people will be calling for Flip North Carolina on Sunday, and they have a set time, 2 to 4 on Sunday. And so one could go naturally from calling right into the debriefing to talk about it. So we just want to make clear that you are basically an independent agent. You'll be signing up for the activities with Flip North Carolina, not with us. And if you need to cancel, you would cancel with Flip North Carolina or the Wellins campaign and not with us. It's not like canvassing in the past with 31st Street, where I think Julie Greenberg had people sign up with her and let her know whether they were coming. So we're not doing that. We're just facilitating the organizations that we think can be helpful in reaching our goals. So just to cover briefly a few points about voting in North Carolina. The registration, to register in North Carolina, you have to be a US citizen, you have to be 18 or over, and you can't be currently serving a felony sentence. And you can't be, that means you also can't be on probation or parole. And these are the questions if you were to volunteer for You Can Vote, and you would be calling people to register them. This is the first set of questions you would ask. Do you meet these 3 criteria? So as I said, you can register people up until October 9th. There is an exception that even though early voting starts later, if you go to an early voting poll place, you can also register there or update your registration with a new address. And when I've done calling, I have memorized just 2 websites and 1 phone number that are, I think, cover most bases. And the website for registering voters, if somebody happens to ask you about it, is this website that I've listed here, the website of youcanvote.org/register. And that's good because you go there and somebody can just on their computer check to see if they're registered. And if they have a motor vehicle license, they can, if they're not registered, they can register there, or they can update their registration right online. If they don't have a driver's license or a DMV ID, they can input information through that website and it will be sent to You Can Vote, and You Can Vote would send them a registration form that they, with a stamped envelope, and all they would need to do is sign and date it. So that's a useful website. As I mentioned, in North Carolina, they do have an early voting period, and it is 17 days, October 15th to the 31st. And it's any polling place in the county the person lives in. That's where they can also change their, update their registration. They may, if they're going to register, update their registration, they will need identification that includes their name and current address, like a utility bill. And the early voting places are also where you can drop off write-in ballots. So the other website that I think it's very useful to know is this one mentioned here, youcanvote.org/voting, because that you go to that website and there is a box for early voting, and you can look at any county and find out where all the polling places are. And it has another box for write-in ballots, and you can request a write-in ballot through that website. So there's the option for write-in ballots in North Carolina, and starting September 1st, you could make an online request to get your ballot. So that's available now through the website that I mentioned, youcanvote.org/voting. And the ballots are being mailed out starting this week. When somebody completes a ballot, they need to have a witness. There are other rules governing it, but this is just sort of the basic idea. And now turning to the mechanics of calling for Flip North Carolina. Flip North Carolina uses ThroughTalk, which is called a HubDialer or Predictive Dialer. And when you dial with Flip North Carolina using this ThroughTalk, there are other people making the calls. I believe there are other people making the calls. You are definitely not making the calls. The calls come to you when a connection has been made. So they have screened out, not perfectly, but largely, answering machines and busy signals. So it's only when someone has answered the phone that you get the call using this dialer. Every session with Flip North Carolina is 2 hours, and basically the first hour, 50 minutes, is training on using the HubDialer, which actually only requires about 5 minutes of training, but and about the candidate and the purposes of the call and the district you're dialing into, and they're very careful to help out. In the case of Wellens' campaign, he uses a simpler kind of dialer in which you're not actually pressing the buttons to dial in, but my understanding is you basically press one button and you're dialed in, but you are dialing each number yourself. And so you're going to get some machines, answering machines, and some busy signals. The campaign manager, in the case of these calls, will train for about 15 minutes before each session. When you use ThroughTalk, they tell you it's best to use a Chrome browser to connect, and that it's probably best to use a cell phone and have earbuds or headphones. That's what I've done. I don't know how well it works if you don't do that. It works fine if you do that. And I just added this line here that the Zoom call is separate from ThroughTalk to try and get across something if there are people like me who are totally unfamiliar with this whole thing. You are in a Zoom call to be trained, and at the end of the training, you can either close out the Zoom call and be done with it, or you can leave it going in the background and then click on a link they provide you to ThroughTalk, and you'll be doing your calls, and that's separate and apart from the Zoom call. If you leave on the Zoom call, then you can ask questions if you have them while you're talking in ThroughTalk. Now I'm going to try something which is an experiment for me. This is a video that Flip North Carolina developed to illustrate the steps of how you get onto ThroughTalk. So I just wanted to play about 2 minutes of it so you are familiar with this. And when you actually go for the training with Flip North Carolina, you'll see it again and they'll go into it in more detail.
you're ready to make calls, you're going to log into the system by putting your name, email, phone number, and clicking get your login. Then I'm just going to copy and paste my login ID and password. When I hit next, I'll choose my service. I only have one option now, but when you log in, you may have different options, and you're just going to choose the phone bank that you're doing that day. If you're using your phone, you're going to uncheck this box, but since I'm going to be calling through my computer, I'm going to leave that box checked. Now I'll click sign in. Now I'm in the system, and as soon as now it's going to start. I'm going to click here the system is going to start calling, and then I'm going to make my first phone call. You might have to wait a few minutes, especially if you're one of the first people to log in and there aren't a lot of callers calling yet. As soon as I hear a ding, I'm going to start talking right away. Hi, may I please speak with Amy?
This is.
Hi, Amy. My name is Brianna. I'm a volunteer with Flip, North Carolina. FlipNC is an all-volunteer organization working to elect Democrats to our state legislature.
That sounds good. I like Democrats.
Great. So are you registered to vote at your current address?
I sure am.
Excellent. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic, more North Carolinians than ever are planning to vote by mail this year. Do you think that you're most likely to vote by mail, to vote early, or to vote on election day this November?
I usually vote early.
Okay, that's great. Would you like for me to send you a link with some information about how to request an absentee ballot, just in case you decide that you'd like to have that option this year?
Sure.
Okay, I'd be happy to send that information.
Okay. It goes on with the script, and that's actually an outdated script. They're going to be starting a new script on Sunday. So when you volunteer for Flip North Carolina, the day before any call, they'll send you materials on the candidate, the district, and as I said, they'll do about 50 minutes of training. If you have any remaining questions, they will stay on endlessly until they're answered. They review the mechanics, they role play the script, they split people into groups to practice. And so they're quite comfortable with helping until you feel comfortable. So some basic tips about phone canvassing. I think it fundamentally feels unnatural to try to establish rapport with a stranger who didn't reach out to you and who you can't see and they can't see you. So for people who are apprehensive, I think it's a very natural thing. I would say that despite that, it's often quite gratifying. I have a friend who had told me numerous times he would never do phone backing. And I asked him if he would try it once through Flip North Carolina. And he agreed. He tried it several days ago, and he emailed me. I had 24 calls and 6 of them were wildly enthusiastic, so I'm ready and willing to do more. And I think what's going on really is for people, a lot of people among us think, I wouldn't want to get this kind of call, and I don't think my friends would want to get this kind of call, so I'm reluctant to. So it makes me apprehensive about calling somebody else. But I think what's going on is that we are not calling ourselves. we are calling people with very different life experiences, and they have different reactions to being called. I think there are some people who don't, some percentage of people who don't want to engage in a long conversation. And there's a number of people who are kind of non-committal, who are patient and you're not sure what they're thinking. But there are a lot of people who are very interested in the call. So I would say the first goal in doing these calls is don't get hung up on before you've even said hello. And that is a risk, because on the auto dialer, you have to start talking immediately. The voter has already said hello, and then whoever dialed the number has, after they've said hello and decided this is a true person answering the phone, not a machine, they have put that call through to you, and the voter is just hearing dead silence. So you've got to start immediately saying hello. Well, the first time I did it, I had about 6 people in a row hang up on me. I couldn't figure out what was happening. And I think that's what it was. No gap, in no additional silence. So what you really want to try to do is establish rapport with the person you've called. The advice that's often given is to smile when you start talking and keep smiling throughout. And when I can remember to do that, I think that that is effective. There's something that is communicated when you're smiling. I think it's important to keep it conversational and ask organic questions as they come up and listen very actively. I think it's a rather intense experience to be listening carefully and trying to get your major points across in these brief conversations. You need to read the script a few times so that you're very comfortable with it, but don't read it on the phone. The studies that have been done emphasize that it's conversational calls that are the most successful. Being responsive to the person and unhurried. The studies have shown that volunteers can do better than professional callers. And probably one of the reasons is enthusiasm, and another reason is that it's much less scripted. So if you know the key points of what you want to get across, then you can improvise and go with the flow. I titled this "Keeping Your Foot in the Door," as though you were a fully brushed salesman, but sometimes you're met with people, excuse me, who, though they're polite, they are indicating that they don't want to engage. And they say, "We've got this," or "We're fine, we're going to vote for the Dems." And sometimes I have tried, and I think it works often, imposing on them for taking maybe another 30 seconds of their time by trying something and saying, "Can I just tell you one thing?" And so the one thing is kind of an extended thing, but it's this is an extremely competitive race in this district, and candidate, whoever it is, who would represent you is terrific, but to win, she needs a really strong turnout of Dems. Please tell your friends. And at least you've gotten the name across and the general message. And I have had the experience several times where if you say something, that something in there triggers an interest in them, and they'll say, "Tell me more about candidate X," or that they ask some question and then you're engaged in a conversation. If the person you're talking to says that they won't vote, it's pretty much a long shot, I think, to have any change in their mind at this point through a conversation on the phone. But I have tried it, and if people find that something works, it would be good to share it. This does not happen often, that you find somebody who says they won't vote. It's worth asking what they care about to see if that leads to a conversation. I have mentioned Obama's plea that, sorry about this, Republicans are trying to convince you that your vote doesn't matter. And as I said, I've tried this a couple of times, and I would say it hasn't been successful, but maybe other people can come up with something that works. So for me, the three messages that I keep in mind are, this is what is in the back of my mind when I'm having any phone call. I'm hoping this person will vote Democratic up and down the ballot. I want to communicate the candidate's name. And I want to emphasize the advantages of voting early, because at least the advantages compared to voting on November 3rd. For the voter, they have a range of choices of days. They can avoid bad weather. The lines are likely to be shorter if they, when they have a choice, you know, because there's 17 days to choose among. For our outcome of electing Democrats, there are advantages of not relying on write-in ballots, because you don't have to rely on the post office, and because it's just technically more difficult to do write-in ballots. And I read a blog from the Cook Report saying they expected that Democrats would lose about 2 points through relying on write-in ballots, because so many are thrown out on technical problems, or just the simple lack of a signature on the ballot is often the case. And the third point I keep in mind is that to enlist this person to tell their social circle about this candidate, about the importance of voting up and down the ballot, about the importance of early voting. And this seems critical because we are only reaching about 5 to 10% of people on the list through our calls. So how do we get the other 95%? And it's through enlisting these people to reach out to their networks that we have more scope. One of the programs of Flip North Carolina is specifically designed to recruit people that have indicated an interest in reaching out and developing an ongoing relationship with them about how well they're doing in expanding the circle. And I do want to say, for people who indicated an interest in participating in that is in a pilot stage. And also Flip North Carolina is requiring people to have first engaged in the regular phone conversations before they join that effort. So you would need to sign up for some sessions of regular calling. So those are the three things that I keep in mind: vote Democratic up and down the ballot, importance of voting early, expand the circle of people engaged. I think what you can realistically expect is that you'll have 2 to 3 calls every session when you've established some rapport, you've provided information that they're grateful for, or you've generated enthusiasm about this, or you've gotten a commitment from them to spread the word. And sometimes you can have as many as 10 calls in an hour, which are gratifying. So this is inherently just a labor-intensive process to expand the people engaged. I wanted to conclude with this statement from Marion Wright Edelman: democracy is not a spectator sport. I think that to play on this, a good ending is something that Kate Sugarman, who's a member of 31st Street, said. She wrote last night that she's not an athlete. She works with a lot of Ethiopian athletes, and when they run with every fiber in their being, she said. And from now until Election Day, that's how she's going to run. So I will stop sharing. And I have never done this before, so I didn't realize that I can't look at the chat while I'm sharing the screen. So let me answer some of these questions now, and then people can raise their hands if they have other questions. Somebody asked if Flip already has the email addresses of the people called. They do not. They have a phone number, and they don't know if it's a cell phone or a landline. And so so they don't know if they can text them. So you have to ask that when you're asking them if they want information. Will we only be calling registered Democrats? No, these are Democrats and people that the Flip has reason to believe are left-leaning. I don't know what data sources they have to make that judgment, but it is certainly the case, my experience in calling, that it is a rare person who is not sympathetic. So this is not, I think I have only encountered one person who was a Trump supporter, and that's in many hours of calling. This next question about updated information regarding sending out absentee ballots if someone is planning to vote either early or on Election Day. I think the new script makes that simpler. It just emphasizes early voting, and it doesn't encourage people to, it provides information if they want it about the write-in ballots, which is the same as an absentee ballot. But it doesn't encourage them to do it in addition. The write-in ballot is an absentee ballot. The script is right in front of you, yes. It's on your computer and you are going through it, and you're having to click on answers to a few questions as you go through. Sometimes I don't actually go through the script and click on the answers as I go along. I have an idea of how it proceeds, and so I can fill it in later. There are also, in the script that will be starting, there are places along the way. If somebody ends the call early, or whenever they end it, at the end or along the way, there are places to write in any comments you have on what's happened. I can share the link to the video. I can send that out separately. So this is a question: you can vote calls might be easier in that you're not making as much of a partisan ask, but instead getting someone to register. I don't find them as easy. I mean, other people might have other opinions. First of all, they include a lot of people who are not that interested in this whole process. I don't know what the selection criteria is, but I think they have included a lot of people who are probably felons, or, they may have completed their felony sentence. What I get the sense that the people on the phone, there is a higher proportion of them leading chaotic lives. So and also partisanship is a way of bonding with somebody. When it's completely nonpartisan, it's more challenging. It's because it's more theoretical. So I think it's a worthwhile thing to do, but personally, I find this easier to do. If you're familiar with the process in the HubDialer, you can start calling right away. Yes, you don't have to go through the training each time. You get calls more frequently the more people that are on at the same time. So if you wait until everybody else is calling, like if you wait until, say, it's from 2 to 4 and people are going to start calling at 2:50, if you started calling at 2:50, there'll be more people on and you will get calls every, between a few seconds and a minute, maybe. Sometimes every second you'll get a call. If you do it early and there's nobody else on, then you will have to wait longer for calls to come through. And that has something to do with how many people I think are calling the numbers at the other end and sending them to you, because if they find somebody who answers, they got to have a person to send them to. And so they are not going to be calling as many people if there aren't that many people to pick up the phone. I don't know if that was clear, but the outcome is that the more people that are on who want to engage in the call, the more of us that are on, the shorter the waits between calls. The Welland Calls will also have a script on the computer, and they will send it out in advance the night before, I believe. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't done calls with that campaign. I think you can track your ballot in North Carolina, and there is a separate project that will be starting. I think there is training for it starting called ballot curing, where there are problems with the ballots. You can. I assume the individual can find out if there are problems with their ballot, and the Democratic Party apparently can find out and try to address the problems so that the ballot doesn't get thrown out. We'll be sharing information about that program too. What are criteria for write-in absentee ballots in North Carolina? If that question was about anybody, there are no criteria. Anybody can use a write-in ballot. Okay. I don't have the information now on how you track the ballots. If you call for Flip North Carolina, they do not have your telephone number, and they will assume you're calling from North Carolina. I don't think I've ever been asked where I'm calling from. And no, you don't have to do Welland Calls. I mean, we don't have any ability to make anybody do anything. So does the predictive dialer pick volunteers to continue a call? I'm sure it is just whoever's available. They don't know. Yeah, they just give you the next call. So if anybody wants to ask another question or comment on something, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I am Katie Flanagan, and I just asked the question about Welland Calls. So what I mean is, does 31st Street feel like it's, or do you have a view about whether it's preferable to spend some time on Welland Calls versus Flip North Carolina calls?
Well, the reason we added Welland Calls on was because Flip North Carolina was only doing about 9 or 10 out of the total, and we thought that his was an important campaign to help, both to help him because he could win, and because he's got a lot of untapped Democrats that could help, not just him, but Biden and Cunningham. Now, since we set that up, it's possible that we can have a session for Wellins through Flip North Carolina as well. But I feel like I've sort of obligated us to help Wellins campaign directly for at least a couple sessions. So I think it's up to you. I'm hoping that we can get some people to on a couple Sundays to help the campaign directly. If you do the calling through the campaign, you will be able to leave messages, which we can't do through Flip North Carolina. So you can get the word out to some more people. I'm hoping people will do both things.
Okay, thank you.
Could I jump in,
Yeah.
Michael, just to say that his race is right in the crosshairs for the state Senate. And as Michal said, there's a lot of low turnout Democrats in that district also. So it's
Okay.
priority on both sides.
Is does he happen to be in Eastern North Carolina?
Yeah, he's right in the sweet spot of Eastern North Carolina.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, you'll have to unmute yourself.
There we go. I'm sorry, I had to duck out for a few moments, but I know with text, through text, you are keeping a record of who has responded and who hasn't and who wants to be taken off a list and that sort of. Is that something that this system does? In other words, recording your interactions with callers?
I don't believe it does. But I don't recall ever being told that it does. If somebody doesn't want to receive any more calls, if they say that, you can
Yeah.
note that. You can note that on the choices.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
Yes, hi
It's
Betsy.
Betsy. I haven't done any phoning through Flip North Carolina, but other phoning that I've done, they do record the responses, and that's why, why you have to answer these questions while you're going through the script. Those questions update the database.
Yes, you do have to answer the questions. I was not indicating you don't answer them.
No. What I'm saying though is because you're answering those answers go to update the database.
Oh, that's true. I thought I was answering, are they recording the verbal exchange? And I wasn't ever told that, or I don't recall that.
Oh,
But there is a record of their responses through what you have selected on the survey that you're answering for them.
also, will you be sending out a text, or not a text, an email with the the times that are available for phoning through Flip, North Carolina?
I'll tell you now what they are.
Okay.
Um,
And the contact also, like how you,
Okay, yeah, because you're responsible for signing up. So they are Sunday afternoon from 2 to 4. The first hour is the training, or the first 50 minutes is the training. And then Tuesday, I think it's 6 to 8. Maybe you have to double check me on this, but this is how you find out. You go to FlipNC.org, and then you pick the tab that says events, and it lists all the caller afternoon evenings that they have coming up, certainly through September. And then you just register through that site. And the day before the call, you'll get an email with information, the script, information on the candidate, on the district, everything you would need.
great, thanks.
Michael, I have a question. Jim mentioned that Welland was in the, quote, sweet district of Eastern North Carolina. What exactly is that city or area? I mean, the reason I'm doing this is my father was born in Eastern North Carolina, and I spent a lot of time there as a kid, but what exactly is Welland's district?
Is Jim still on the phone?
No.
Oh,
It's Nash and Johnston County, I believe.
what is it?
Nash and Johnston County,
Yes, that's right.
other area, I believe.
Yeah.
Springfield, what? Smithfield, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I put a link to the map in the chat too.
Oh, thanks.
So to get, sorry,
Yeah,
so to
go
get
ahead.
started, do we do this flipnc.org and if we want to, it doesn't start this Sunday. I'm on the Sunday group. It doesn't start this Sunday, it starts the following Sunday.
No, there is one this Sunday.
There is one this Sunday. So I could just go ahead today and go to that site and click on events and click on Sunday. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, they're doing Western North Carolina this Sunday, I think. What they did until this month, they were just doing challengers, Democrats who were challenging incumbent Republicans. And they were doing, every day was a different, they would repeat some, but basically every day would be a different candidate. But in September, they've started doing it sort of by regions. So you might have a House and a Senate candidate in the same region. And they are including Democratic incumbents who are in a very precarious position. So I think that that's true this Sunday, that they're incumbents in Western North Carolina, which is more Republican. And they have a difficult time coming up. And
So when we're calling, we're just calling for a single candidate, is that correct?
well, the script, that's something, they just started this calling for more than one. And I've only done one call like that, but the script was still around about one candidate. So I don't have a clear answer on that. They may be working that out, how they're going to deal with two candidates, or whether you do, I mean, what I did, since the script only talked about one candidate, but there was another candidate, it was Adam Erickson, who was running in Hanover County for the House. And there was, I think, Harlan Peterson running for the Senate in the same area. So I talked about Adam Erickson, but I would also just mention that Harlan Peterson, who is an incumbent and Adam Erickson is not. I think it's also, I think it's sociologically interesting to do the calls because you find that different regions, there's kind of a different picture you get of people in different regions of how they react to the calls. No place have they been hostile at all, but there's some places where they're extremely enthusiastic and some places where they're more polite. Do people feel, how do people feel about doing this? Is there anything else I can tell you or?
Hi, it's Ellen. I just wanted to have a question about the Wellins campaign calling specifically. We'll be getting emails that will kind of set us on the path to being able to do that if it's not being done through FlipNC. And what date have they decided to start on those calls?
Well, that's somewhat up to us. And I was thinking that we would start on the 13th, Sunday the 13th and the 20th to do those 2 days at least. And I might send an email around to people to see whether people would say whether they would do it on the 13th and the 20th with the campaign, and whether they would be willing to do through Flip one special day on Wellins, because they have said if there are enough people from 31st Street that they could set up one time for Wellins. But I don't know how many people we could get to do that. I know we couldn't get the numbers that they have for most of their calls, which is 50 people. But I think what I'll do is send around an email around to people to see what they are willing to do, and then we can see if we'll do something besides the 2 times for Wellins in September, starting the 13th.
Excuse me if you've already said this, but when do the calls for Flip begin?
Well, there's one this Sunday. They've been going on for a while. On Sundays, they're 2 to 4.
Okay.
And Tuesdays, I think they're 6 to 8. I'm pretty sure they're 6 to 8, where the training is the 6 to 6:50 and the rest is calling. They might, if they do some additional ones, they might do them on Thursday. And they also are planning to do texting, but probably just a few times.
Thank you.
Hi. I just want to mention that you had mentioned the date of the 20th, and there is a Zoom call, basically a fundraiser for North Carolina candidates on the 20th that Swing Left is sponsoring. And some of us are co-hosting. It's to raise money to pay for campaign ads for the candidates.
What time is that?
At 5:30. The official notice hasn't gone out yet, but some of us who are co-hosting are sending that out. But you just want to, keep that in mind, that that's occurring on the 20th.
Okay, thank you. I'll check on that for how that affects things.
Okay.
This is Lois. You had asked how people were feeling about.
Yeah.
So, I'm anxious about it, but I figure I'll feel a lot different once I get into it. I've never done it before, and I hate these calls. So it was really helpful for you to say we might feel about being called, that we hated it, and that somebody else living a very different life would experience it differently. I mean, I'm just like, nope, not interested.
I
Um,
I know. Well, it is quite different. I've had people say, you can call me anytime.
okay. Yeah.
So, unless there's some other, some other point I can answer or provide something on, I think we can conclude the meeting. We'll have, a debriefing on the September 13th at 4. We'll send out a notice on that for people to talk about what their experiences have been. And I think with Flip North Carolina, you just have to jump in and try it. The person that I mentioned who said that he was ready to sign up again, he really was adamant that he hated it. And and also he's kind of the most computer illiterate person I can imagine. So I thought that was reassuring.
I just like to step in here and say that I'm not a huge fan of phoning, but from what I've heard from Michael, and also I know this guy who she's talking about, it sounds like times when I have phoned and I have reached people who are enthusiastic, and it just makes my day. I mean, it really is a high. And in this political environment, that's a really important thing to have. So, I encourage everybody to get out there, and we're going to win this thing.
Thank you, Betsy. It's true. And that was a good note to end on. It really is true. If you've made a connection to someone you had no knowledge of before, and they're living a very different life and often a very hard life, and you feel like there's a connection and you've helped them with something, it is a high.
Can I just ask one clarifying question? I know there were several sessions going on simultaneously today, and you've recorded them all. For those of us who might have also been interested in one of the other groups, will we be hearing from Team North Carolina with links to the other recordings? So if we want to hear about, for example, the group that's going to focus on some of the voter suppression issues and so forth, how we might get that information?
Yes, I'm sure we'll have an email goes to everybody who has signed up for the team about the links to each of the recording sessions.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, and this was very helpful.
Great. Okay, well, I hope everybody takes the plunge, and maybe you can't be like, Kate Sugarman, the person who said she's going to put every fiber of her being into this. But to the extent we can put a lot of fibers in, that would be good. And then we can get back together and share what experiences we've had. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. And I'll see you all soon.